and welcome to Wide Angle this week. After reports of at least 17 mob lynchings over the last 3 months from around the country, police saying that many of these were sparked by rumours that circulated on WhatsApp, the government of India has told the instant messaging social network company to find ways immediately to control the spread of rumours and fake news. For a platform that ensures its users end-to-end encryption, which basically means messages go off their servers as soon as they're delivered between the two people communicating. Is this feasible? Joining me to talk about this critical issue, because fake news is something we all need to deal with, is Bedavyas Mohanty from the Observer Research Foundation, lawyer who works on technology issues. Thanks very much. And of course, we all know Nikhil Pava of Medianama. Nikhil, thanks very much for being back on the show. Let me start by asking you, because you have written a piece a couple of days ago essentially saying one way to combat this is if WhatsApp decides to make its messages or make users choose between public and private settings for its messages. Tell us a little bit about that and whether you think it's actually feasible, because this is a problem, clearly.
Yeah. So look, if you look at it, WhatsApp started as a messaging platform and it's become a media platform, where what was once meant to be just communication between two individuals then became communication from a person to a group. But also it's become a media platform. It's the largest media platform in the country if you think about it. It has about over 200 million active users in a month, and I would assume that the daily active users are higher than any other media out there. A large part of the consumption of audio, video and text in the country is happening on WhatsApp. Most first-time users that are coming online in this country are getting exposed first to WhatsApp, maybe Google services as well, but first primary exposure to a media platform is on WhatsApp, where they're getting messages and communication and media, videos from their friends. So for all of these users, there needs to be a distinction between what is a private message and what is media. Because media, if you look at it, is something which because it's a public broadcast, there needs to be accountability, and that accountability, if you look at it from a journalism perspective, is brought in through attribution.
Correct, yes.
So my solution here is that firstly give users a choice of what to keep private and what to make public. If they're making something public, then let there be attribution for what they're making public, because then there is a certain amount of responsibility attached to it.
Right.
Even if you look at fundamental rights, the reasonable restrictions are applicable on what you're doing in the public domain, where if there's illegal speech, that is going to, there are limitations there.
There are repercussions from the law.
In the public domain. So therefore, people need to become more conscious, and my sense is that if a message is sent through, it should have a unique ID which WhatsApp can trace back to the original number, which then there's already a KYC process, so identification is possible for law enforcement agencies, but also because it goes from person to person to person. If the same message ID is there, then it can be linked back to the originator, but more importantly, it cannot be, the identity is only available through a legal process. So that protects the privacy even of a person who's not done any illegal speech.
So you're saying there are ways to actually navigate this without compromising on user privacy?
On the user privacy, the last point is that I think we need a mechanism which allows users to report such information, so that one thing that if law enforcement gets in touch, then because it's a single message, that can then be stopped across different platforms. Because it's a single unique message ID which WhatsApp can shut down. So, and they can even suspend the account of the originator then.
Right. The WhatsApp has responded to the Ministry of Information Technology, essentially saying things like they're committed to ensuring a safe and secure environment for all their users. They don't want any public disorder or criminal activity to be associated with their platform. So the right noises, but it needs a holistic approach. They've also interestingly said that because a lot of this is about communication on groups, and the government came down and said the administrators of those groups would then be liable. They've said that these groups, which allow a maximum of 256 users, are actually not more than 9 or 10 people per group. Now, this is an interesting response, one that shows intent to tackle, but not really any solution.
Well, Maya, I think it's a little too early to tell. Their intent is clearly visible, like you said. but they have a few things that I think are in the pipeline that could perhaps be effective. Now, when it comes to dealing with something like this, I personally prefer soft regulation, right? I don't think as a knee-jerk reaction at this early stage, we should be introducing technology controls that may be difficult to roll back. So in that way, I am sympathetic with WhatsApp's idea that they want to categorize things as forwarded messages or typed out messages. For instance, that can maybe have a person take a step back and think more before forwarding it to the next person.
Right.
So it's things like that I think are soft measures that can perhaps be effective. Now, priority one right now is stopping the spread of these messages, right? And in that, I think not a lot of companies so far have in fact partnered with media companies in tackling fake news. A lot of people are dealing with it. But done right, if you, for instance, a message that we all receive and we recognize it as a fake news and we report it as spam. So on a certain number of people reporting a message as spam, WhatsApp then starts integrating another message with each such forwarded message that people have reported this as spam. Go to these verified news sources, ANI, Reuters, to verify the authenticity of the messages.
Right.
I think this can go a long way in perhaps raising awareness, because I think that is a fundamental necessity.
So I kind of disagree with that. Firstly, I don't think from WhatsApp's messages, I don't think there's any intent that they've highlighted to counter this yet. They have been acting on it for a while, but clearly what they've done so far is not enough. They have been slow to move, so I would disagree with you when you say that this is still early days, because I rember as far back as 3 years ago when there were riots which were instigated by a WhatsApp by a WhatsApp message, and there've been signals across the globe where WhatsApp messages, because they're private, because once you forward it from one person to the other, there's no identification of who originated it, they have led to serious problems. In fact, this was one of the arguments that the telecom operators were making at the TRAI on August 8th, 2014, when they were asking for regulations for internet services in the net neutrality context. So this is not a new problem, and it isn't an early stage. We've had 65 internet shutdowns this year. We had 70 last year. 65 already in 6 months this year, right? And a large number of these, if you talk to, we spoke with the superintendent of police, one of the superintendents of police in Rajasthan, and he said very clearly that we don't know how to deal with the spread, so we shut the internet down.
Right.
This is not a new problem. WhatsApp has seen this coming. They're acting now because the minister
has
acted on it.
Yeah.
And I think the government is also late in reacting to this. They should have done this a long time ago.
Well, the argument can be made about the government saying that social media was a free democratic space. They've been actually pushing for the fact that, the mainstream media has been, in a sense, been rendered irrelevant almost with the social media and the kind of information that comes out over there. We have a prime minister who doesn't even address the mainstream media, but only uses social media.
But the same restrictions that apply to speech offline, that are
Should
reasonable
apply to
restrictions, which are
speech.
constitutional
Right.
restrictions, should apply to all the social media platforms, and in fact, they do apply. So there's been a paucity of enforcement there, because the government doesn't know what to do about it. The platform doesn't allow anyone to do anything, including WhatsApp.
So the way I see it is that there are two issues here. One is the responsibility of the platform per se, and the other one is this issue of fake news. We saw even when the government circular came out, it actually didn't target any social media or citizen journalists or what have you as the people responsible for fake news. It looked at accredited journalists who might be responsible. There was a huge backlash against that, and they had to roll it back. Now, in the case of WhatsApp, to some extent, I agree with what Nikhil is saying, that they've seen this coming for a while. And social media companies across the board, in fact, have been sort of sitting and seeing which way the wind blows on these conversations before essentially reacting to them. Had it not been for the US elections, the bots wouldn't have become an issue. Had it not been for Cambridge Analytica, data mining wouldn't have become an issue. And now, were it not for an act of violent crime, WhatsApp would not be in this position.
Fair enough, Maya. I agree with all of that. But it's the collective effect of all of these steps, your internet shutdown, your draft national encryption policy, and fake news on Facebook and Twitter and bots and so on. Now, the central difference here is the expectation of privacy that people have with respect to WhatsApp versus the other platforms, right? Yeah. And so when you say that reasonable restrictions on the fundamental rights exist, privacy has always been considered, has been defined not by the place you're at, the medium that you're using, but whether a certain person has a certain expectation of privacy. And this anonymity that WhatsApp offered was the central, most essential offering of the service. So because the government has been especially ham-fisted in its response to anything implicating technology and violence, that I'm more uncertain that a technology control solution is in fact what we need today.
So Nikhil, just to take that point further, and this whole issue of all social media companies, one of the things that one keeps hearing and why WhatsApp has become such a problem is the relative ease. I mean, the internet, I think the users of mobile internet versus broadband in this country are possibly comparable also right now. Smartphones are cheap, data is cheap, all these things.
This is going to grow. We're adding about 80 million new connections, internet connections every year.
And they're mobile internet connections.
Almost all mobile. So, about 96% of internet connections in the country, if not more, are essentially mobile internet connections.
So they shut down mobile internet when there is a law and order problem.
Not all internet when there's a law and order problem. In case of Jammu and Kashmir, there have been instances where they've shut down specific apps. There was a list of 22 social media apps, some of which are not in use in India, that the government pulled out from some Google search and then got all of those blocked. The UN actually issued a statement criticizing selective shutdown and also saying that shutting down the internet is a disproportionate response because you are curtailing the speech of all you're curtailing the speech of all for the acts of a few. And I think that's something to keep in mind even when it comes to law enforcement right now. What we are seeing, if you set aside the fact that this is because of passions that have been aroused because of WhatsApp messages, the fact is that's led to action where people have come together and have lynched people. The fact that they feel like they can get away with it is a failure of governance. Every time the internet is shut down in the country, there is a failure of governance because this is essentially a restriction on your constitutional rights to free speech, right? So the government is admitting that they are unable to maintain law and order. And I think that's one of the main things that forget the WhatsApp piece of it. Lynchings are happening. Why isn't the law and order machinery doing something to prevent this? Whereas this is also an intelligence failure.
So therefore, Nikhil, let me just pose it a little differently. Yeah. Yes, the fact is that this is a law and order problem. This is also a social problem. The fact that a rumor is being spread on WhatsApp and how that rumor is translated into an act of violence, there's a particular pathway, a trajectory that it takes. Now, one can make the argument that that pathway, as you said, the law and order problem is what needs to be tackled. So when you look at WhatsApp's response, they're essentially saying, we're not part of the problem. It's not, you need to act more as well.
Right. So I would say that the distinction between the accountability and the responsibility of WhatsApp.
Okay.
Legal accountability cannot be imposed on platforms or messages on them because that will just kill free speech.
Correct.
That will kill all speech. So there is a safe harbor provision under Section 79 of the IT Act, according to which the medium is not responsible for the message, right? But when informed about it, the medium needs to act within a stipulated period of time about a violation. And here there's a problem that WhatsApp cannot see which is the message. So my solution essentially allows them to suspend that message. Let me just finish, right? Now what I'm also saying is, even though there is no legal accountability, and we don't want that because we fought very hard for these kind of protections for platforms. Remember, the intermediary liability debate began when the founder of Bazi.com, which was later bought by eBay, was arrested because someone sold a pornographic CD on their website.
Right.
It was a peer-to-peer, person-to-person e-commerce. So therefore, they said the platform, the marketplace, is not responsible for the actions of a seller or a shop. In the same way, a messaging service is not responsible for the message that is sent through. This is very important. This is what keeps the internet functional. This is what allows these platforms to reach this kind of scale. campaign, because if you have, let's say, laws applicable for messages, then copyright law will be applicable for every time someone sends something. So, but what I'm saying is there is a responsibility that WhatsApp has to ensure that its platform is not misused. There's no legal accountability.
But there's a responsibility. And that's what is the case for many social media companies as well. The responsible, where does the buck stop? I mean, how responsible do you want to be, or do you want to hide behind, where the platform we are not? But
the primary responsibility, Maya, in my opinion, of these platforms lies in the users, right?
Right.
So when Nikhil says that they need to take on some of this responsibility and that some of these technology controls are justified, I don't think we're thinking far ahead enough.
So, in fact, that was going to bring me to the question is, when we're talking about the responsibility with the users, if you see something or I see something or you see something which is potentially insightful or hateful or problematic, we have the option to report it. Many a time we don't. We just delete that message. What happens when you do report that message to WhatsApp? Is there a process that they're using right now when those messages are reported?
WhatsApp has been criticized by organizations like the Electronic Frontier Foundation for a lack of transparency. They do have a mechanism for taking down content that has been reported as spam or abuse, but the process...
Not abuse, I think. They don't have it for spam. They have it for spam, but not abuse.
Yeah.
Right. So, but the process through which they take that down is not clear. It's not transparent. So, my opinion is that there are existing mechanisms through which we can prevent or curb the spread of these messages. Primarily, there is a cooperative mechanism that needs to be developed between WhatsApp and Indian authorities, right? In the same way that there is metadata sharing for law enforcement, the WhatsApp needs to be more responsive to Indian law enforcement's demands to take down certain content, right? That's step one. Now, with respect to user awareness, for instance, their work around, I agree with you that it's really early to tell and they have nothing to show for it yet, right? But it is also partly the responsibility of the government to work with these platforms to ensure that awareness is spread, that people people who are first-time internet users receive this message that this is possibly fake news in an easily consumable manner, easily understandable manner. And there needs to be other steps that the government needs to take to target people who are low literacy demographics.
Okay, here's my next question.
So I had an add-on idea to that, which was that for every one of these new users that is coming online, they need to be run through a mandatory tutorial of about 3 or 4 minutes, and maybe again a couple of times regarding responsible usage of the platform.
Okay.
Education is very important, and I know that there are radio stations that have run campaigns on fake news, and there is I think the police bought hoardings in Bombay or something like that. So there are things but no medium is as powerful for this message as WhatsApp is. I would also
But Nikhil, here's my question about fake news, because what tends to happen as a journalist, I sort of see this all the time, is that when people choose to believe something that is patently fake, we have fake news busters who are working 24/7 in this country today and putting out why something should be fake. They are being discredited for a political ideology. You have people who are willing to suspend logic and reasoning and say, no, this is our point of view. Just because you say it's fake doesn't mean it is fake. So you're dealing with combating information. So even, for example, if WhatsApp sends out an added note saying we have received reports that this news is fake, is it their responsibility then to take it off their platform completely after doing their own verification process of it being fake, or do they, in the spirit of free speech, say that we think it's fake, you decide whether you think it's fake?
So this is essentially what you're looking at. What you're looking at is something called delegated governance in the sense, right? So you are delegating the act of maintaining our rights to free speech and curbing on illegal speech to a platform like WhatsApp, which they already take on using the terms and conditions. I'm not in favor of that kind of an approach, and I think we need to distinguish between the types of speech. So if you look at the 66A judgment of the Supreme Court, where there was the government had a law called 66A where people were being arrested for news for information or updates that was annoying or disparaging and which was declared unconstitutional.
Yeah.
We fought for that. Now, in the judgment, what Justice Nariman writes is that advocacy is fine. And I would assume that also means that false information is also fine. But what is problematic is incitement to violence. What is clearly illegal speech. So
Yeah.
what is under law, the speech that is illegal offline should not be legal online as well.
So how will they make
so
a
if I-
distinction
if I-
between advocacy
So if
and
I tell you
incitement?
something- So if I tell, because I mean incitement is basically calling to violence.
Yes, in a direct way, but there might be things that are creating an ecosystem of a message that are equally giving you a signal that it's okay to be violent. That message in itself may not be violent, but it's creating a system.
Then
This
the
messaging,
question
for instance, was not calling for violence.
Exactly,
It was
but
warning
illegal
people
then.
against.
Child abductors, right?
But is that message technically, legally, is that illegal? It's not. So you can't.
Correct.
So if it's not illegal,
What is the recourse then?
So the recourse is really re-education. Is education?
So here, okay, given that this statement from the government has come on the back of these killings of people who had been suspected or accused of being child abductors, in this particular case, the police and the law enforcement will now step in and take its own course. The fact that this message about child abductors was doing the rounds on WhatsApp, who could have reported it as fake news? Who could have reported it as a rumor? And if it had been reported, what options were there available to WhatsApp? Veda?
There are pilot projects that are running in Telangana and UP where the police is essentially more involved community policing, where police officers are going to panchayats and asking them to keep an eye out for incendiary content, where some of delegated policemen are in fact parts of WhatsApp groups that like keep an eye on public WhatsApp groups, not necessarily snooping. So there are mechanisms through which they can tackle some of this. Now, the difficult part of regulating speech is that ideally you shouldn't do something until there is a direct correlation between the speech and the violence, right?
Correct,
That's what
right.
dangerous speech or hate
Right,
speech is.
yeah.
Now, that should never be left to any platform in the world to decide. There are community standards that WhatsApp will follow, right? But that needs to be backed by an assessment of a quasi-legal body like the police agencies saying that this is leading to public disorder or causing a situation.
So just the messaging, even if it's not directly insightful, is leading to public disorder.
I mean, if there is an unintended effect or maybe...
So is that for the police to do?
Yes. I mean, for the police to register cases, correlate it back to a particular message or a class of messages
Right.
and then say that this is a form of incendiary content that's doing the rounds right now.
Okay, so just as a follow-up to that, some months ago, the government decided that because they didn't know how to tackle this problem, they were going to make administrators of WhatsApp groups liable for the content on those groups.
Yeah.
Was that something that was workable? Was it a logical solution?
I think what we're only seeing is knee-jerk reactions because they have no control over. Look, how can you hold the moderator of a group responsible for a message in that group if the moderator cannot pre-approve messages?
Correct.
And then if you're doing that, then you're going back to Kapil Sibal's ask for pre-censorship, which happened during the
66A hearings, right.
No, what we've seen in Kishtwar is also pre-registration. You have to apply to the district magistrate with a form saying, I want to start this group, this will be the name of the group, this will be the purpose of the group. That's what's
I don't think these
solutions.
Not just that. I don't think they will. If they are challenged in court, they will fail. These are legally. I don't think you can do.
But here in the case where they're going to a magistrate, he's got the jurisdiction to say you don't have to come to me, but he's not doing it.
Yeah, I mean, under what law are they doing this? That's my question. There is no law that allows it, right?
I think this is a rather ridiculous instance that has happened. I doubt that anyone will take this seriously. But what it is that it's emblematic of a larger problem with knee-jerk reactions. Consider this. This is WhatsApp that's happening right now. And for some years, some WhatsApp content has been linked with violence. What about deepfakes, right? This is just a doctored video that's been doing the rounds.
Right.
We're going to have artificial intelligence, we're going to have virtual reality. You're going to have doctored videos and images of political leaders
That look absolutely real.
that look absolutely real and making speeches.
Yeah.
How are you going to regulate that then? I don't think any preemptive technology regulation will stand the test of the time. And when I say test of time, I mean the next 10 years.
So I have one little point to make,
Yeah,
which
go ahead.
is
We
that
need to wrap up.
one of the things that I've been hearing about is this idea that you need a new law for social media. I think that would be a terrible idea. We have sufficient laws that govern this space. We need, yes, I believe we need platform changes from WhatsApp, but the laws are sufficient to deal with this. If we start creating new laws for social media, I'm very worried about
Well,
what
those
path
laws
that's
are
going to go
liable
down.
to abuse as well, depending on who likes what's being said or not being said.
Also in this environment where there's a great deal of concern and fear, any new law which gets created, which we've seen with the IT Act amendments in
harsh.
2008, will be an overreach, will be an overreaction. So I'm very worried about going down that path, right?
And we already have enough number of laws that criminalize speech.
Yeah.
One of the
Right.
very few democracies left in the world.
That actually have these,
We have a criminal defamation law which needs to go.
Blasphemy, public disorder.
That's a different debate altogether. But yes, we have a situation where, you know, the freedom of speech is there with reasonable restrictions, as we have in our constitution. One of the few democracies, as you said, where freedom of speech can also not be an absolute, right? Well, clearly not looking for legal or government heavy-handed solution to this, but scope for tech companies to find ways to create systems, whether it's counter speech, whether it is something more technological and software driven. We need to tread with caution there as well. Privacy, security, the perennial debate as far as the digital space is concerned, but no easy answers. And we leave all our viewers also thinking about what potential solutions and answers you could have. Thanks very much for watching.
To receive instant updates on all videos from The Wire, click the subscribe button and hit the bell icon. Pay to support independent journalism. Click the link in the description and choose the amount you want to pay.